Pox is a digital game that is highly effective at engaging players and making them want to continue play. In the game, red dots try to take over the board, and the longer red dots are allowed to spread, the more likely one of those red dots is to turn black. A black dot is bad, and depending on the level of play, only 2 to 5 black dots are allowed before the player loses the game. On each turn, red dots usually spread, and the player is given the choice to surround and trap them by making some of the gray dots blue, or change one red dot into a happy blue dot. Players are particularly careful to keep the yellow dots protected because they are considered weak and can turn black if a red dot comes near. After presenting this game to my students for play and talking to them about their experience, it's clear that the primary goal of the game for them is to figure out the game's programming and beat it. There are times in the game when none of the red dots change, which is kind of a pass for the player because it affords another turn to act without the game changing. Students were very interested in how to trigger this action. There are times when the game allows a user to change 3 dots to blue, and others when the player can only change 1 dot. There are also times when the player must change a dot to red. This is the trickiest part of the game because players are basically playing against themselves at that point. Students were very curious to figure out what triggered this type of turn. In essence, the game became an investigation of patterns and programming, which is why I've referenced it only in dots. If you understand that the value of pattern seeking and strategic thinking is high in terms of knowledge itself, you are thinking this is a great game for that type of knowledge, and it is. The problem with POX is that this is not its primary purpose. It's not actually about dots. The designers of POX intended to create a game that demonstrates the issues around infectious disease and immunization. The full name of the game is POX, Save the Nation, and the mysteriously sad music that plays in the background is meant to encourage deep thinking about the spread of infection. The black dots, they're dying. The blue dots, they're immunized people providing an impenetrable barrier to keep the rest of the dots from becoming sick. Unfortunately, in my classroom, students were barely cognizant of the true purpose of the game. Their language was correct in that they call the red dots sick and the black dots dead. But when asked about the power of immunization after playing for 2 days, the students were stumped. When asked if they felt a moral obligation to keep dots from dying, or whether they even realized the game was about life and death, the answer was unequivocally no. So, POX does an excellent job in introducing players to game strategy, programming, and the engaging nature of play. What POX does not do well is serve its author's purpose. Because POX fell short of its moral goal, I looked around for other digital games that get at the same message. The Flu Shot game, for example, contains good visualization for young learners, but the cartoonish play of targeting characters with a needle while germs begin to float into the frame is grossly oversimplified and unengaging. I had an 8-year-old play this game, and she was able to understand that, quote, the more shots you give the people, the less sick they get from the germs. Unfortunately, not only was she unimpressed with the message, but she could see no reason to continue to play even for fun. The History of Vaccines.org houses a game called Illsville, which targets older children and focuses on the idea of herd immunity. The player has an aerial view of humans traveling around town in what is imaginably their daily routine. One individual gets sick, and that icon turns red. The player is informed of the illness and even has a chance to diagnose and treat it before it spreads. As the player plays the role of doctor responsible for continually trying to diagnose the illness while simultaneously quarantining the ill, the player hints are excellent for guiding through the game, but the options are very limited. Try to diagnose, quarantine, try to diagnose again, succeed, or fail. Nova has a game more focused on vaccines themselves and how they're made, but this game contains highly technical levels of scientific content and is largely text-based. My students didn't find it engaging at all. For a game that combines strategic thinking, engaging play, and effective content around disease control, Pandemic is still the best I've seen. Whether playing the digital or tabletop version, Pandemic achieves these goals. If played as a board game, Pandemic also allows for collaboration and systems analysis that the previously mentioned games cannot provide. The main reason this is possible with Pandemic is because it's designed for group play, specifically group role play. Roles are chosen before the gameplay begins, and each role affords different abilities to affect the outcome of the game. Because this is a cooperative game, all players must try to utilize the roles the best way possible and plan their moves in accordance with the next player's moves. The opportunity for discourse is remarkable. Students playing Pandemic also said that they could more easily identify with its content-based goal because the role-playing gave them a feel for what real healthcare professionals, emergency workers, and disease control professionals actually do. In contrast to the digital game making vaccines, one student even pointed out that playing the role of researcher developing vaccines helped him understand the role of vaccines better. This is because not only did he take on the identity of the doer in Pandemic, but he also got to see his role in the overall system being laid out before him. Many presentations at the Digital Media Learning Conference this year focused on giving games a higher purpose, more than simply engaging in play. While I still stand firmly in the Birdie to Coven camp and believe that not all games need a higher purpose, the games mentioned here are attempting to convey a higher message. Only Pandemic seems to fill that goal. Talks is a digital game that is highly effective at engaging players and making them want to continue.